We are learning how to weave on a loom. Weaving is the interlacing of two sets of threads or yarn, usually at right angles. The lengthwise yarns are called the warp, and the crosswise yarns are called the weft, or the woof, the filling. A very simple weaving can be done by hand, but most weaving is done on a hand or machine operated loom. Here are a few of examples of looms. You can see the warp and the weft and the yarn. Here's an illustration showing you the weft moving through, getting woven into the warp. All right, let's see how this is done. Here at my table you can see I have yarn, I have a loom. It already has its warp on. I have a pencil and a tongue depressor. Right now I'm just going to put the pencil carefully underneath every warp string and slide it up to the top. We do this so we won't really have trouble getting the yarn through our weaving. Now, boys and girls, I'm going to use this stick. You might get a stick or you might get a piece of cardboard, and we want to put it at the bottom of the loom so that we're not going to weave beyond that point. All right, you're going to take a piece of yarn, and we don't want it to be too long. So we're going to measure it out. I'm just going to pull this yarn a little bit farther past the loom, once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and cut it a bit at the end. That should be long enough to start our weaving. Now, we're going to take that piece of yarn, loop it under the far right warp string, and tie a little knot. If you need help with this, I can help you, but you have to be patient. Just tie it probably twice so that you have 2 knots holding your weft, that means the yarn that you're weaving with, onto the warp. And I like to cut the end off. All right, boys and girls, try to hold the yarn in one hand, and the first string is going to be the over portion of the warp. So we're going to go over the first one, it's tied to the first one, and then with the second warp string we're going under. And I like to double up the end so that I can hold on to the yarn more easily. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and pull through. Don't pull it too tightly. You want to kind of arch up, pull it slightly over. Make sure you don't make the edges cinch too tightly, and carefully comb the yarn down. Perfect, that's our first row. Now we're going to look, the last string was over, so now we need to go under. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, and under. Now we're not supposed to pull too hard. You don't want to cinch it, so you want to make a little arch shape And then carefully comb everything downward so that we're not cinching and pulling the edges too tightly. And now we've done the opposite. We're always doing the opposite. If we started with over, we're going to start with under, or vice versa. So right now it looks like we're going to go over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. Kind of pull, but don't pull too hard. You don't want to, oh, see, I pulled it a little too hard. I want to fix that. Pull it back a little bit. You don't want to pull that too tightly. Create a rainbow arch and then carefully comb your yarn down. And you have a few rows of yarn already woven into a weaving. Now, we have to do the opposite. If we look at the end, we're going to see that we need to do the opposite here. So now we're doing the opposite. We started with under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And carefully pull and arch over. Hold the end. Don't pull too tightly. Make a little arch and comb it down. And I think I might be pulling too tightly, so I have to tug back on it. There you go. Next row. And we're just going to keep repeating. It's a pattern. It's an A-B pattern. Now I'm going over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. And create like an arch shape. Don't pull too tight. You're going to pull your weaving in too tightly and just comb it down. All right, you can see that I don't have enough yarn to complete the full pass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick my new color and I'm not going to tie them together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the same weaving pattern. So right now it's under, over, under, over. I'm just going to bring a couple over, maybe shove it behind a little bit, and then tuck this little older color behind, and then I continue. Over, under, over, and down. And now I'm going to go back the other direction. You keep moving forward. So now I'm going under, over, under, over, under, over. And you do not have to worry about tying the pieces together. Under, over, under, over, under. Woo! I did that kind of in a wild way. And make my little arch and tuck down. There we go. And now I continue. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, and start to create that little arch shape, always making sure your loop doesn't get all tangled up here. And there we go. Bring it to the edge. Don't pull too tight. Softly create like an arch shape and start to bring it down. And I kind of wish I had a little comb, but I can use my fingertips too. And there's my pink row is starting to show. And then I turn around. You can see the last string goes over. So I'm going to bend my yarn in half and go under, over. And I'm going to always go in the opposite pattern. And when you double it up, it works much better. Now, weaving isn't simple, but when you really learn it, it's relaxing and pretty satisfying and a lot of fun. And believe me, you're going to know how to do something that most people don't. So, once again, this is under, so I have to go over. Okay, students, enjoy yourself. These are the basics for this tabby type of weave. And remember not to go too quickly and always watch your edge, that it isn't too tight, and then just lower it carefully down. You don't want it to be too loose and you don't want it to be too tight, so it's kind of a happy medium. And look, I've noticed I'm over right now, so I need to go under. Okay, thank you, boys and girls.